NBA salaries have increased like crazy over the last 10 years, and that's mostly a very good thing because the league's best players are being rightly compensated for bringing home the bacon to $100 billion corporations. But unfortunately, in times of great abundance, there are always a few bad apples who reap the most rewards while doing the least amount of work to get there. Here are 3 of the worst contracts in the NBA today, and to give you fair warning, the last one will deeply trigger you because the stupidity surrounding it is in a league of its own. Let's talk. Before we reveal the first person on this list and the third worst contract in the NBA, it's important to know what we base this on so it makes a little bit of sense. I want it to be the fairest possible, and so we are not basing these contracts solely on injury, meaning that guys like Zion Williamson and Joel Embiid are not on this list despite making max money and not playing because they are still effective when healthy, even if that is not super often. That is first and most important. Secondly, we are going to be focusing only on max contracts for this episode. But let me know in the comments if there are other salary tiers where you think dudes are savagely overpaid. So, in a nutshell, these 3 players are all on a max contract, are currently suiting up for their teams, and are performing extremely poorly when they do so. So without further ado, coming in at number 3 is Paul George, who is currently on a supermax contract of 4 years and $212 million, averaging in and around $53 million a year. His arrival to Philadelphia was supposed to make them a championship contender, but Paul George started the season with an injury, which is not his fault. But since that point in preseason, he has truly disappointed in all the promises made, and it seems like he's got over the injury. But it's not the fact that he hasn't played in that many games. But where this contract is one of the NBA's worst is how bad Paul George has looked when he's played. He is averaging 16 points per game in his lowest output since his rookie year. His defense is nowhere near the lockdown defense as advertised. And worst of all, he was signed to all that money to show mentorship and leadership, and he has shown zero commitment on that end. Instead of showing preparation or sacrifice to the younger teammates, he's calling them out for a lack of championship mentality and clearly prioritizing his podcast despite the fact his team is not doing well at all and his second star is also injured. Worst of all of this, now Philly, instead of being title contenders, are so bad they might actually play themselves back into the lottery. My God, if you are the NBA or a top draft pick next year, you better pray to all the spirits you don't get stuck developing behind Podcast P. Or, as I like to call him, Ponzi P. What's insane is Philadelphia is also paying Embiid max money to not play, as we said, but at least when Embiid plays, he's still effective. Unlike Ponzi P, where the future looks kind of grim too, because players like him, who are 6'8" small forwards with significant injury history, only tend to go downhill from here. Philly is in big trouble for a long time with this contract. But if you can imagine, there are actually 2 worse contracts than Ponzi P's, because if he gets healthy and commits back to basketball, he still could make good on his contract because he still has 3 years. He just isn't doing it today. This next person is actually on a significantly worse contract than Paul George because he got paid a gargantuan contract 4 years ago and gave up on caring about basketball pretty much that same year. So he's been collecting fat checks for years now, is still doing so today, and is giving you absolutely nothing in return. At number 2, Ben Simmons, in one of the most shocking, weird, And still mysterious drop-offs in NBA history, Ben Simmons still stays winning off that gargantuan contract he received, and then pretty much gave up on basketball afterward. Across 38 games this year with the Nets and the Clippers, Ben Simmons is getting paid $40 million and has averaged 7 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. If I thought Ponzi P was a con artist, Ben Simmons is making this guy look like Honest Abe. Straight up. According to Spot Track, Ben Simmons is the 27th best player in the entire NBA today. A guy who is giving you bottom 30 production is getting paid a top 30 salary. He's producing worse than a second round pick given his experience in the league, yet is still caking $40 million this year. Imagine, Paul George is only making $10 million more this year, right? It really is all relative. I'd rather have Paul George over Ben Simmons any day, and that is saying a hell of a lot. But despite how awful Ben Simmons' contract is, the silver lining is that his contract is expiring at the end of this year. So no matter what, you can be done and dusted with Ben Simmons. And truthfully, with Paul George, because he put together such a good contract year last year, he was gonna get paid regardless. We could say Philly obviously got fleeced and paid him the most, but still, you don't blame a team for paying Paul George because he was gonna get paid anyway. We can also somewhat point to injuries with both these two guys. But this last contract is going to leave you deeply triggered because it makes no damn sense. And there is actually absolutely nothing the team can do to make it better. Plus, the guy isn't injured. This is the absolute worst contract in the NBA today. Number 1, Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal signed a 5-year, $250 million contract. So the highest one on this list to start. He signed it with the Washington Wizards in 2022. And at the time, people already had questions because of the lack of winning he had showed and if he really met the number 1 player on a championship team designation. But because he was the Wizards franchise player and had committed to them long term, it somewhat made sense because he was still going to at least give you quote-unquote elite production on a crappy team where the fans would pay to see him lose because they had no expectations. But when the Phoenix Suns traded for him, it became a 180-degree difference because they now had championship expectations as they mortgaged both their future and their present, giving up a hell of a lot, including Chris Paul, who was pivotal in helping lead them to an NBA Finals run, in addition to draft compensation. Then they destroyed their salary cap because they were already paying Devin Booker and Kevin Durant max money. And now they owe Bradley Beal an additional $50 million a year. My goodness. They should have never made that trade to begin with because Bradley Beal was arguably never worth that kind of money. But if you thought it couldn't get worse, it does. In addition to questions about his talent, the Suns should have never ever traded for him because he and Booker play the same position, and Booker is significantly younger, is arguably better, and Phoenix has said that he is the only untouchable piece. And so, since Beal's arrival, the Phoenix Suns with their so-called Big Three have seen very little action together, whether it be due to injuries initially, and now it's just been termed a bad fit. Who could have seen this coming? Absolutely everybody with half a brain. Now, Bradley Beal, 3 years removed from being an NBA max player, is having to come off the bench and averaging 17 points a game. And here is where the icing on this shit cake takes it all and cements it as the NBA's worst contract. Bradley Beal is getting paid $50 million a year, averaging 17 points a game, but is also one of 2 men in the entire league with a no trade clause. So the Phoenix Suns can't even trade him for pennies on the dollar if they wanted to. So even if the Phoenix Suns wanted to rip themselves off like the Mavs did, they couldn't. And that has really shown itself in the recent trade deadline saga with the Suns, where they tried to shop Bradley Beal, but any teams that he was interested in didn't want him because of his diminished production and absurd salary. But any teams that were interested in him, he squashed immediately with his no trade clause because he didn't want to go to a bad situation. This then led the Suns to try to shop Kevin Durant, despite zero reason to do so, instantly blowing up any semblance of team chemistry. Wow, tragic. In the cases of Paul George and Ben Simmons, those contracts are absolutely awful, but at least there is a light at the end of the tunnel for both teams. Whereas in the case of Phoenix and Bradley Beal, it's hard to see a future where either party benefits.